Hi, Landon.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
Better than
So,
I've been, that's for sure.
so thank you for coming on our podcast just to kind of highlight South Coast counseling. Um, and why don't we start out by just kind of you giving a little overview where you're at with your sobriety today, what you do for a living, and then we'll kind of go from there. So,
Okay, so I have almost 11 months sober, which is huge for me. This is my longest
congratulations.
spree. Thank you. I am a math teacher at Orinda Intermediate School. I've been teaching. This is my 10th year, minus the 2 years that I was trying to get my life together
So,
at
what
SEC.
what grade do you teach?
I teach seventh grade. I taught sixth and seventh last year, and this year I'm just teaching seventh grade.
So, seventh grade is 12 and 13, right?
Yes, the
Yeah.
best age, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got one of those at home. Their personalities completely change at that age. They go from
Oh
being
yeah, it's the best.
your sweet little innocent kid to becoming a teenager overnight. So that's
Yeah,
fun.
it's the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah. Okay. So like to start out just by kind of going through kind of your journey of life and what happened and what it's like now. And kind of wanted to just start out by, wanted to show you a picture. You sent me some pictures. Thank you for doing that. Of you, I think this is when you said you were about 10 or 11 years old.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
so.
And talk to me a
That
little bit.
haircut is
Yeah.
amazing.
I love that haircut. So talk to me a little bit about who that little girl was at 10 or 11. What did you want to be? What was your family life like? Where did you guys live?
So I grew up in Texas, and I had the most amazing family. We lived in a small town in Texas. Um, both sets of my grandparents were involved in my life. Both of my parents were super involved. They never missed a ball game. They never missed, an award ceremony. I was, talking to my mom even before the sobriety journey happened. My mom was always like, you were just like the best baby and the best kid. And I really did like walk to the beat of my own drum. But I just, I loved life, and like I just didn't let people, get me down. I didn't have anxiety as a kid or anything like that. Like everything hit me in my later years. So my childhood was just um it was a dream. It was a dream. I hope to give Bear the childhood that I had. I'm very thankful for my parents and my family for what they did. And, growing up in Texas, everybody tells you, I mean, Texas is the best place there is. So, even though I'm raising my kid in California, visiting Texas and stuff is, always like makes my heart happy. But I'm enjoying life in California too, because this is a place that changed my life. So,
You and I have that in common, absolutely. So I grew up in Tyler, Texas as well. So did you always want to be a teacher? Was that always something you
so
wanted to do or
I did. So my mom was a teacher and my grandmother was a teacher. And so I would always like grow up pretending like I would be in my mom's classroom after school, pretending I was a teacher. But there was a while there that I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. Um, but when I got to college, I realized like you really had to, you couldn't party and kind of go down that path.
right?
So, I did. But in all honesty, my junior year of high school, which was also my senior year because I graduated early, I had a math teacher who his name was Mr. Odom, and he was my calculus teacher. And just the way he taught math, and it changed my life. And I was like, I want to be able to do what he does, because math is such a difficult subject for a lot of people, just because they automatically think they can't do math, which is not true. It's instilled in them from when they're kids. They hear, their parents like, oh, I was never good at math, or blah blah blah. So everybody just thinks they're bad at math to begin with. And
Right.
this teacher really instilled that like you can do math, you just have to find the way that you learn it. And because of him, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a math teacher. And that's what I did.
Nice. Okay, so very happy childhood, big Texas family. And then high school happened, and then talk to me about your high school days.
So, I would say the biggest thing I remember about high school was, I grew up in Italy, Texas. We call it Italy. 2,000 people.
So is it Italy or Italy?
It's spelled Italy, but we pronounce it Italy.
Yeah, kind of like fitting the two.
If you're from there.
All right, gotcha.
So super small town. Everybody knows everybody. Lived there my entire life. My mom, taught at the school I went to. She taught my sister, but she always like moved to a different grade whenever I was approaching her grade level, because she's like, I can't teach you. I don't know why, but she always did that. But I would say like such a good life. I don't remember anything traumatic happening. And then my freshman year, I found out that my parents were going to get a divorce. My dad had an affair, and it's hard to, it's not that I want to like call him out on a podcast, but like I've learned like during my journey to sobriety, like you have to admit the things that really have hurt you along the way and be honest about them. And so that is one thing that, and I feel like it turned my life upside down. I ended up moving from Italy to Rowlett, Texas, my junior year. Huge change. My brother, Ashton, my older sister, had already graduated. She was out doing her own thing, so this didn't really impact her. It was my brother and I, and, we stayed with my mom the majority of the time during that first year of divorce, because my dad was a fireman, so he was gone every third day. So we did see him, but we were with my mom the majority of the time. And we ended up moving to Rowlett, which is a 5A district. Huge.
So little bigger school, little bigger community.
Yes. So like I went from, I had like 50 people in my graduating class to over 800. So it was a culture shock for me. My brother was starting junior high there, so it's easy for him to, make those lifelong friends like in school. But for me, I was as a junior, it just was a culture shock. And I will say I did not give it the chance I should have. I was so shut down, and I just was like determined to make it miserable, because I was so angry inside for having to move there. So that's when kind of like my rebellious ways started to play into my life. I started like drinking on the weekends, but nothing like crazy. And I ended up like telling my mom I'm graduating a year early, because I was in advanced classes. And so I had all the credentials. And so she was like, okay, but you're not going off to college until you're 18. So I was like, fine. So I like graduated early, and then I still had to live with my mom, went to a little junior college in Dallas. And that is just kind of where like my party stage just like flew off like the map. Do you want me to start there or just keep going?
Yeah, keep going. So you started drinking when you started going to junior college, and you were 17 at the time.
Yes. And so that first year of college, man, I mean, I like dropped so many classes like without even telling my mom. And then I didn't realize that like you only had 6 classes to drop in college. So by like the next year, I was like, oh my God, I dropped so many classes. But I decided, me and my best friend moved to College Station when I was 18 the next year. And so we lived in our own apartment. And that is where I can see my drinking starting to become a problem. Back then, I always just, was just like, oh, I'm in college, like it's fine. But like I would realize like I'm pre-gaming the pregame. You know what I mean? Like I'm drinking in my room before I'm supposed to be drinking with my friends. I realized now the little signs that were there that was like, okay, you don't drink normally, even as a college kid. And so we lived in College Station for a year. And the next year I had to move home because it just wasn't working out. I was going to end up either failing out of school or, getting in a lot of trouble. For some reason, I don't know how I never got in trouble. I did get an MIP, like a minor in possession. But that was like the extent of the trouble I got into,
Yeah.
like in my entire life with drinking, luckily. So I moved back to Texas, and that is when I made the decision. I was like, okay, I'm going to get my shit together. Like, this is ridiculous. I knew I was smart enough. Like, I should be finishing college, and making my parents proud. And so I guess I had like set the anger aside a little bit, but it never healed. It was
Right.
always just kind of like buried in me. So I started going to a branch of Texas A&M, and for a good 3 years there, like my drinking was not a big thing. However, I was secretly smoking weed all the time, which it's not legal in Texas. So I just replaced one thing with another, but I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't drinking. And I was going to work and I was going to school and, I'm finishing my degree. And, so the year before I graduated college, I stopped everything. I really focused in. I was doing my student teaching. And so I would think that was probably the last year that my life was stable from drinking. Like, I didn't drink, I didn't party, I didn't do any like substance. I went to school, I did my student teaching, graduated college, and I was super proud of myself. And I started teaching in December of 2013. I graduated in December, and the school needed a math teacher for 4th grade. And I took it. Which that's how I learned I wasn't meant for 4th grade, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
And so that's when, okay, graduated college, I'm in this next step of my life. I think I was 22. And then after being 21, I'm on my own now. I have a career, I have a salary, and that's when my life we were here. And then you can just each year just see like the decline in my living, so do you keep going?
Yeah. So talk to me about that decline. So you're on top of the world. You graduated from college. You made it through there at Texas A&M, correct? So,
Correct.
and
Correct.
you got your credential, started teaching 4th grade. Things are going well. And then so talk to me a little bit about the decline and kind of how you kind of cross that line from becoming someone who's able to manage and control their drinking and smoking a little pot to getting out of control, because that for most of us just doesn't happen overnight. So
Right. Because I've had like so much time to think about this, especially like in my journey to get sober. It was when I started to like school would kind of be a little bit stressful, like, and I would pick up like a little 4-pack of the little wine bottles, right when I would leave school for the day. And then I would go home and I would like pour those all in a cup and like chug it. And then I would go get more wine. And I think now, and like then I didn't think I had a problem, but like that's not normal. You know what I mean? So and I would just slowly see myself. I was drinking every single day. But it wasn't like I wasn't not going to work. I wasn't like hiding like out from my family. I wasn't like doing anything. I was just drinking all the time when I was at home. And I felt like it just made me like a happier person, put me in a better mood, things like that. I would go out on the weekends, like with my best friends. I wasn't in a relationship. I hung out with my nephews all the time. And so like when I was with them, I would always be sober. But the moment that I would go home, I lived by myself, it was just like party with Landon, like by herself. And I got into a relationship in 2015. This was with my first husband. And at this point, I'd already had multiple, I was going through a double bottle of wine a night. Um, and I remember one night I was sitting outside on my porch and I was crying, and I just called my mom. I was like clearly drunk, and I called my mom, and because at this point it's in my head that I'm not drinking normally. Like there's an issue here. And I called my mom and I was crying, and I was like, I think I have a drinking issue. And she was like, what's going on? And like, I'm bawling, and like, I'm just telling her, like, I drank a double bottle of wine tonight, blah, blah, blah. And like, just telling her, like, I don't think I'm drinking normally. But then the next morning I would call her and be like, I'm so sorry about that. Like, I'm fine. Like, I'm not going to drink today. But in reality, I was still getting a double bottle of wine.
So at that point, Landon, you weren't drinking in places you weren't supposed to drink, as meaning at work. Right. And then you were waiting. Correct. Until you had your time alone, or your time once you had taken care of all your responsibilities, but then you were drinking alcoholically during that time.
Yes. Okay. Like a lot.
Right. Okay.
So I got into a relationship in 2015, and at this point I knew that I knew I was going down a path that probably wasn't good. I had an alcoholic uncle who, he was sober. He's been sober for, I think, 30 years now. But, I knew I had the gene. It had always been, I was always told that growing up, I knew I had the gene. And at this point, I'm like, shit, like, I've activated this, like, this is happening. So I was just trying to like feel like whatever void it was that I was drinking so much for. And I got in this relationship, and from the beginning, like, I knew we were not meant for each other. And my family hated him, like hated him. But the thing is like, oh, you hate him? Well, now I'm determined, like, to make this work. Like, you don't know him, blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't go against what Landon thinks, And so we had a long distance relationship for 2 years. So I still drank all the time, like during the week by myself, things like that. We would party on the weekends when I would go visit him, or vice versa. And in 2017, I packed up everything. I lived by myself in this little house in Italy. I packed up everything and I moved in with him in Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. And I was, 3.5 hours away from my family, which one is huge for me. My family's so tight knit. Everybody's so close. And here I am. I'm like, I'm moving to another state. Knew I shouldn't do it. But that, when somebody asked me, when did you start spiraling so hard that you realized you weren't going to stop until you hit rock bottom, it was when I made that move to Louisiana.
So that was the event that kind of took it over the cliff. Okay.
Yes. And he was emotionally and verbally abusive, just not, not the best guy in the world. I knew right away I had made a horrible decision. I'm teaching in Louisiana. I hate the job. Like I worked at this inner city middle school. It was a disaster. I mean, I had to provide my own printer paper. You know what I mean? Like, it was a disaster. So I'm away from my family. I'm away from my nephews, who at the time before I had a baby, like, my nephews were my kids,
Right.
And so then that is where I put the wine down and I picked up vodka. Okay. And I would buy every day after school, I would buy a double bottle of wine. I would buy a 4-pack of the little bottles of wine, and I would buy a big bottle of Sky vodka. And that would last me about like 4 days. But the wine would last just 1 day. So I would drink, like, my partner at the time, he always got home late. School for me got out at 2:30 p.m. He didn't get home till about 7. I would chug that whole double bottle of wine, fill it up with water to make it look like it's still the bottle of wine I had yesterday. But in reality, I've already drank all of that. And then I, have in my closet, because my closet was in the guest room, I had that bottle of vodka, which I would walk in and like drink, and also those little bottles of wine, just to kind of like keep me drunk enough until it was time for the next day. I was so unhappy there. I was so unhappy. I never drank at school yet, or I never drank at school. Surprisingly, I did have. I'll get to that, but it just was a disaster. And then we find out that after a year of living there, he gets stationed in New Mexico.
Okay, so he was in the military, correct?
He was in the military, yes.
Okay.
So we pack up, and at this point, we're married.
Okay.
And I remember we just got married by one of his friends, didn't have a wedding. I remember the day, like, driving to like have this like wedding or whatever you wanted to call it. I was wearing, like, I literally left school that day, went to the mall. I didn't even have anything to wear. Like, it was a disaster. Like, my life was a disaster. And I was thinking to myself, why am I about to marry this guy? Like, that, like, you're not okay. But, I was just like, I'm determined. Like, I got to make everybody know I'm fine. My sister's living her best life. My brother's living his best life. Like, I can't be the child that, disappoints my family. And like, so I'm just trying to make them believe like I'm okay. Which I look back now and it was a shit show. It was a total shit show. So anyways, I was married at this point, and I'm like, well, guess I'm going to Mexico. And at this point, this is 12 hours away from my family. So I couldn't even drive to see them for a weekend like I could when I lived in Shreveport, which was only 3.5 hours. So we moved to New Mexico, and I'm still on my vodka train. I don't know why, like, my ex, he never called me out on it. He never said, like, you drink a lot. I don't know if he didn't like realize it because he like just wasn't all there. So that's a whole other story. Or I don't know if he just didn't care or what, but like, he never saw me sober ever. Like, he would come home from work and I would already be drunk. He wouldn't know that. He would think I'm sober. He would think I was sober, but I wasn't. At this point, I was pouring water bottle or vodka into water bottles, and I would have those in my car. And as soon as I would leave school, I would be chugging those back to base where we lived. We lived on base. And like, first of all, like, I don't know why I was doing that. Cause like, I didn't like, they could have just been like, man, it smells like alcohol. Like, and somehow that never happened. But, I would call my mom every day and I'd be crying. And at this point, my anxiety had hit me so bad. I would call my mom at 3 a.m. Like, I can't sleep. I'm like slurring my words drunk. I have vodka hidden everywhere in the house, like, because it was to the point I was not even able to function without alcohol in my system. I was calling off of work all the time, just wouldn't show up. I was sick. Like, I mean, I can't even tell you some of the excuses I made of why I couldn't go to work. Like, they probably thought, like,
yeah. At this point, were you drinking at work at all before work?
No, I never drank at work. Okay. I think the only way that happened was because I would still be so drunk from the night before. Like, I wouldn't need to, but all day long, it's when I would that's all I would think about was the vodka in my car. Like, I just need to get to the vodka in my car. I would leave work like early on days because like my prep period was always at the end of the day. I would leave early without telling anybody. Like, it was just a disaster. And at this point, I'd started seeing a therapist. I was telling her, like, I knew I needed help. I knew I was an alcoholic, but at that time I was refusing to say I was an alcoholic. And I was just like, something's happening to me and I'm just drinking a lot. And I need to figure out why I'm drinking a lot so I can stop. And so we would try all these like therapy techniques, blah, blah, blah. But I think the issue is I would never admit that I was an alcoholic.
Right.
And then one day she was like, have you ever thought about just going to a detox? And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. Why not? And so I go to this detox in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I walk in and it is like a prison. Okay. Like, the toilet is metal. Like my bed is like, and the thing is like, no one told me if you check yourself into a detox that you just can't decide you're going to leave.
Yeah.
And so I'm like 10 minutes of being there. Like my husband had dropped me off. He was like, peace out. Like I'm done, gone. And I'm like, I can't be here. And like the doctor came in. I was like, listen, like this was a mistake. I should not be, I'm not like them out there. Like I'm not supposed to be here. And like, I'm like freaking out. Okay.
What year is this,
And
Landon?
this was 2019, summer of
Okay.
2019.
So
And
pretty close to the time before you and I met. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And oh my God, it was just awful. Like I cried nonstop, and I felt like I was in jail. I was like, this like can't be, like, why am I here? Like, why are they making me stay if I don't want to stay? And anyway, I survived 48 hours there. Okay. I survived, and my mom drives up from Texas when I'm getting out of there. And she's like, okay, are you okay? And I was like, yep, I'm never drinking again. I don't want to end up like those people in there. Okay. So she helps me decorate my classroom. I stay sober for like 3 days. Okay. Like I've got my drinking under control. Like absolutely everything's good. I just need that little eye-opening experience. So needless to say, like that was just like the tip. My mom leaves and goes back to Texas, and I go to my school. It's like nighttime. I'm working in my classroom, and I'd bought wine, and I was drinking wine, listening to music, decorating my classroom, which I shouldn't have been doing that. But so my drinking's automatically like started back up again. So drink. I'm even more of a shit. Like my depression has hit me so hard. Like how I would look at work like was disgusting. Like I would just get up, like show up to work. I'm swollen at this point. I'm getting to the point my body's starting to shut down. I'm throwing up before work every morning, like because I'm like withdrawing, as well as I didn't realize it, but I was coming up to pancreatitis, a whole other thing. So we're just gonna fast forward, and COVID hits. And I get stuck at home on base. And at this point, I've been drinking a gallon of Tito's vodka a day. This lasted for like a week. I don't like, I really don't remember much. One thing I remember is at this point, I'm sick. I have pancreatitis, my body's shutting down, and I'm laying in bed. And what I thought was my rock bottom was I drank mouthwash because I didn't have the energy to get up and go buy more alcohol. I was just leaning over the bed, and I would just throw up on the carpet. It was bad. It was bad. And so the next thing I know, I wake up, I'm in a hospital. My mom is on the phone with somebody from the hospital. She's like, I'm coming. Nobody could come in because it was COVID. She's like, I'm on my way to get you. I had detoxed in a hospital, I think, for 4 days. And the doctor was like, told my mom, like, she would have died within a week. Like if medical intervention didn't happen. And he was like, she needs to go to rehab. And so my mom and my mama Grand, those two women right there,
Okay, hold
deserve
on,
the world.
I'm going to stop you right
Okay.
there real quick, Landon. We're
Okay.
going to come back and pick back up. Okay, Landon. So let's kind of pick back up where we left off. You were in the mental hospital. You were talking about the doctor told your mom that you
told my mom she needs to go to rehab. And that is when my mom and Mama Gran, which is my mom's mom, that is where our journey started, because those are the two people that did not give up on me, because it was not an easy journey to get sober. So they drive to New Mexico, pick me up, and we are on our way there. I'm assuming my mom had been in touch with you, and she had been in touch with a few other people. You know, I just remember my mom crying so much on the way there, driving me there. But then we would have moments where we're laughing and things like that. But you could tell my mom was terrified. And the thing is that I didn't realize that like my health was that bad. Like I had pancreatitis, I had hepatitis of the liver. At the time I had acute kidney failure. I mean, my body was like shutting down. So, you know, I'm like telling my mom, like, please, like, will you let me just get a drink, like to drink on the way there? But she's like, absolutely not. Like, you're not doing that. And I'm like, if I'm going to rehab, like, why not? And she just wouldn't let me do it. So we drive to California. I mean, at that point, and then when Mama Green was like, shut your mouth, we're not getting you alcohol. I was like, okay, like, sorry, won't ask again. So we drive to, I believe it was Costa Mesa. And we went to one treatment center, and just the moment like the person came out to get like my bags from the car, like Mama Grand's face was like, what is this place? And like it was very sketchy. It was bad. Okay. Like my mom, like we go to her inside or whatever. And at this point, Mama Grand's already back in the car, and she's called my grandpa, and she's like, Landon's not staying at this one. Like we need to find another one. You know, my mom's like, well, we're going to go down and talk. And we just get in the car and we leave. And so I'm like thinking, sweet, like I get to like stay in a hotel with them one more night until like we find a place. But my mom calls you.
Right.
And you're like, oh, absolutely. Like, you know, I'll meet you at, you know, I think we met you at the SEC building first.
Yes.
And you're like, I'll show you around. And so my mom's like, okay, like he sounds cool. He's from Texas. You know, I have a good feeling about this one driving. And Mama Grand's like, yeah, well, anything's better than that last one. And so at this point, I am terrified. Like I realize like they're serious. Like they are dropping me off out of rehab. And I never thought I would ever be at that place in my life. Like I was not, like, think back to when I was in the first detox, like I am not one of these people, you know? And at this one, I realized, oh, I am one of these people. So I'm like, okay, like I'm about to go through rehab. Like, and at this point, I'm just trying to accept it. And we meet you, and you take me to Pomona. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I thought walking in was, okay, like this place is nice. Like it's clean. Like, okay, it's not bad. Then you're like, you have your own bed and you have your own TV. And I'm like, okay, doable. Right. So, but I'm like begging my mom. I'm like, can I just stay the night with y'all one more night? And then I'll, you know, and you're like, no, you need to stay like right now. Like you need to check in right now and stay here. Like you're going to be okay. Like you're going to get through it. And Mama Green was like, you're staying. And
I remember your grandmother saying you're staying. And as soon as she said that, you said, okay.
Yeah.
So it was like that dynamic of having your grandmother there. It seemed like whatever she says goes, and you had the utmost respect for her. And as soon as she said something and laid down the law, you were okay. So
like I knew better. Like I wasn't going to get my way. Right. And so there I was at beginnings or SEC, and I was at Pomona, and that was the start of my sobriety journey. Do you want to like say anything, or like do you just want me to keep going?
So that was 2019, just in the middle of 2020. And that was when we were kind of in the middle of the COVID.
It was April of 2020.
Right. And so COVID, we were in the middle of the COVID, whatever you want to call that part of COVID.
Right. And so then there couldn't be visitors or anything. So I was just like, okay. And they just dropped me off and they left, and I was terrified. I didn't have a phone. I was like, they take away my phone. Like, what are they? Like, you know, like I'm an adult. Like I make adult decisions, obviously. Like, why are you taking my phone? But, that was the moment that, you know, I want to say I got it that time, but I didn't.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. You went through treatment. Then what happened? What
So
happened
I
in
did
treatment
60
that
days.
time? And then when you finished treatment, what happened and how long did you stay sober?
Okay. So what happened in treatment that time was I decided to only do 60 days. Everybody kept telling me you need to do at least 90. And I was like, you don't know me. Like, you don't, like, 60 days is enough. I was introduced to your sister, who is my sponsor now, who also plays a huge, huge role in my sobriety journey. I'm just as much scared of her as I am Mama Grant, if that makes sense.
That does make
Um,
sense. Yes.
yeah. So, the whole 60 days passed, and, my case manager at the time was like, you're not ready to go home. And I was like, I am 60 days sober. Like, I am like great. My life has changed. I'm the AA poster child. I got it the first time, and I go home and Mama Grant, I go back to New Mexico. My mom and Mama Grant dropped me off. And within 5 minutes, I'm in my car at the BX on base, buying vodka and pouring it into water bottles. And I was drunk within literally 30 minutes of them leaving. The
So
whole ride
5 minutes after you got home from rehab and were left alone,
yes.
you were drinking.
Yes, because
Did,
the
did you
whole
plan on that, or did that just kind of just
I did not plan on it when I was still at rehab, but the moment we were in the car and I was free and I was outside of the rehab environment, I planned it the whole way home. Like, I was in such a good mood the entire drive back to New Mexico because I knew I was about to drink again. So, like, you could tell I was not ready at all to be out of rehab. So then at this point, I think I called my brother, and I was so drunk, I was slurring my words, and he calls my mom. I haven't even unpacked from the first time. Like, my suitcase is still downstairs at my house, like, from rehab the first time. He calls my mom. My mom calls my case manager, Danielle, and Danielle calls me and she said, you have to come back. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I just slipped up. I'll just go to a meeting. And she was like, you need to come back. Then Mama Grant calls me and she's like, Mama Grant is not cousin at this time. She said, all your shit's already packed. You're going back. We're on our way. Like, they had already turned around. They're coming back. And within 4 days, I left SCC, relapsed, and was back at SCC.
okay.
Like, and so the second time I'm there, I'm like, okay, I like something's got to give. Like, I don't want to keep doing this. At this point, my husband and I were divorcing. Thank God. Like, so that part of me was gone away. The whole, so my dad is working on just getting all my stuff from New Mexico back to Texas, and I'm just going to focus on my sobriety. And so I was like, okay, I'm staying for 90 days this time. I stayed the 90 days. I worked my steps harder than I did the first time, but I still didn't finish them. I balked at making my amends. And Camille was like, you need to finish your steps. You need to finish your steps. And I was just like, I'm working on it. I really did. Like, I thought that I was getting it a little bit. But like, whenever I should have realized then, like, if you're lying to your sponsor about working on your amends when you're really not working on your amends, like, you're not getting shit. Like, right. You're still living the way that, like, an alcoholic lives. And I never would admit that at the time. So I do the 90 days and, I coin out, really proud of myself, but I really thought I had it that time. And I moved back to Texas, and I didn't relapse right away. I was sober for about a month. But at first I was going to meetings. I would say I was probably going. So many people told me you need to hit a meeting every single day. You need to hit a meeting every single day. And I was like, I'm not like that. No, I don't. Like, but I would go to like 2 a week or whatever. This explains why my sobriety only lasted about 30 days, because 2 weeks, no, not even that. I would say 3 weeks. Because then one day when I'm going to a meeting, I was going to go to a meeting in Waco. I actually passed a liquor store. I didn't even, they say pick up the phone. And at this point, like I'd already started the cycle of relapse without realizing it. And so
Right.
I pull in, I don't even get wine this time. Like I get vodka, and bam, like I'm back to drinking, and I'm living in an apartment at Mama Grand's house. And I'm like drinking from the moment I wake up. Then I would pass out at like noon and sleep for a few hours because I wasn't working. I was supposed to be looking for a job. And the next thing I know, Camille knew. She knew. She hadn't called me out about it yet, but I'd stopped calling her my sponsor, and she always knows with me. Always. Like just by the way, like I'm even communicating with her or talking to her, she knows.
Right.
I relapsed, and the next thing I know, Mama Gran has kicked me out, and I have to go live with my mom. And my mom, she's like, you have to like work and find money, like get money to buy a mattress because you're not going to sleep on my mattress. Because at this point, they're like exhausted, like
Right.
2 rehabs in, they like poured so much into me. And so I'm literally sleeping on my mom's floor, and I mean, I had like comfortable blankets and whatnot, like, but like still, like, so I was just like, fine, whatever. And so I'm living with my mom, and then I'm so manipulative, that I am still drinking without her knowing. Like I'm drinking that whole time that I'm living with her, and she thinks I'm sober and like, I'm looking for a job, and like, it blows my mind. Like, so it gets to the point where I realize what I thought was my rock bottom. I called beginnings.
Okay.
And I said, I need to come back. Like, I can't keep doing this. I need to come back. I need the chance to get this freaking right, like, please. And so I called my mom. I'm outside out in her front yard. I called my mom. She was gone at the time. And I said, I'm going back to beginnings. And at this point, I have like a huge purse, and I have filled all water bottles. I had bought 2 bottles of vodka and filled all these water bottles up. Okay. Because I was like, I'm going back to beginnings. But before that, I'm like, whatever, going to drink and whatnot. So I get in the car with my mom. She takes me down to Italy or Hillsborough where my clothes were. And at this point, I'm passed out in the front seat of this car. My mom and Mama Gran packed my bag. Mama Grand jerks the purse out from under me, and I'm like fighting her. I was like, that's my purse, like, can't take that. And she's like, I just did. And she starts pouring out all that vodka. And so now my mom, this time they're not driving me, they're putting me on a plane.
Right.
So I had to stay the night at my dad's house. And all of that was a disaster. I'm trying, it was just, it was a shit show. I get on the plane. They don't give me any money. And I call my mom. I'm at a layover in Vegas. Okay. But I was like, it was one of those layovers where I didn't have to get off the plane. And so the whole time I'm like, why? Like, do I have to like sit here? Blah, blah, blah. So I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I'm starving. Southwest doesn't give any food. Like, can you at least just like Zelle me $20? She's like, fine, I'll give you $20. I don't go get food. Like I go and I buy alcohol, and the lady's like, how are you? And I was like, oh, great. I'm on my way to rehab for alcohol, as I'm like getting my drink for her. She's like, oh, and it, like, what is wrong with me? You know what I mean? Like, so I get there, I get picked up, and that intake picture that you have is the 3rd time.
So that's this picture right here. So
yes,
that was the 3rd time you were at South Coast Counseling.
Yes. Okay. And this was the time that I was exhausted. I was tired of, living that life. I was tired of constantly feeling like crap. I was, just my family was like in shambles because of me. And it was awful. So I come back, and at first I'm like, I'm just doing 30 days. I brought myself here. I just, I need to like get myself back on track. And then I'm going to go back to Texas and everything's good. And then within 2 weeks, I'm like, because everybody kept telling me, Landon, like, you can't keep going back to where like you drank. Like, you need like a support system. And so that's when I called my mom and I said, and this was the time where you could stay in sober living at SCC for longer, like than like you could be like an IOP or whatever and still live in sober living. So I told my mom, I said, Mom, like, I need to move here. So she and Marty brought all my stuff. I was living at Lawton at the time. And this was the time I was going all in. And I did, I stayed sober for a really long time after that. I worked my steps. I didn't finish my steps. And that'll get to my important one. I'm almost done with the story, but I didn't finish my steps like I should have. But like, I was really trying to be sober. Like, I was going to meetings. I was working a program. At this point, Camille had gotten so mad at me. She dropped me for a little bit. So I had like a different sponsor, and which just shows, like, because I called her back and I'm like, listen, like, I'm sorry. And will you be my sponsor? Like, you're the only one that knows how to do this with me. Will you be my sponsor, please? And she said yes. And now I'm here where I'm at today because of that. But so I'm, working a program, blah, blah, blah. And then I move out, and I'm, at this point, I was 5 months sober, move out, and I move in with my husband now, which, by the way, I'm not saying like this was like the smartest decision ever in life. Move in with him, and then we find out in July. So I was 8 months sober. We found out that I was pregnant. And so at that point, I'm just like, I am healed. Like, God gave me a baby. I am healed. I'm just this perfect person now. Like, I'm not ever going to drink again, blah, blah, blah. And the whole time, Camille's like, you better keep working the damn program. You better keep working program, because a baby's not going to save you. A baby's not going to save you. A baby's not going to save you. And I'm like, you don't know me, Camille, what she does. You don't know me. Like, it's different. So I don't work a program. So I'm just this dry drunk. Okay, pretty much. And then this was my legit rock bottom. I had Bear, my son. And I relapsed 2 months after he was born. My mother-in-law came to, she like lived in NorCal, and like she came to visit, and got an Airbnb for us to all stay at. And she said, you can go and get a pedicure and I'll watch the baby. And I go and I buy a bottle of vodka, and I just get hammered drunk while I'm getting a pedicure with my 2-month-old at this Airbnb. And at this point, if you knew, I mean, my mom and my grandma, they did so much for me up to this point. Like, and they really believed that I was going to be okay. And because I was so manipulative and like was so good at lying to people, saying I'm good, I'm great. And my husband catches me. He doesn't tell anybody, at first it's just me and him. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it was a slip up. Like, I'm not going to do it again. And so like his mom goes back home. We go back to our apartment with our baby. And I'm not drinking every single day, but I found ways to drink when I could. I never ever drank where I was like, I had Bear in the car with me or anything like that. Like, Bear was never in danger, but I showed up to a women's meeting with my sponsor, and I was hammered. And I remember going to that meeting, but I don't remember going home. And I drank vodka on the way home. And the next thing I know, I wake up and Bear's not at the apartment. Jacob's sitting in the living room. Jacob's crying. And I'm like, what's going on? Where's the baby? And my mother-in-law had came and gotten Bear that night because I was so drunk I'd passed out on the floor, didn't know it. Jacob was worried that I was like, so Camille came over that night, didn't even know she came over. She had texted me saying, like, you reeked of alcohol at this meeting, like, don't you ever fucking do that again, like, you know. And but I never read it until the next day, like, because so at this point, we're like, okay, we're going to pick up and we're going to go move up to Northern California because we need more support than we had in Orange County. Move up here. I'll just kind of sum it up. I did really good for about a month, but then I started hiding my drinking again, drinking. And then the next thing I know, it was September, I want to say 20th. And I wake up to Jacob, has a suitcase for me. And he's like, you're going back to Texas. And I was like, what? Why? And because I drank myself like into basically a psychosis the night before or something like that. I have no recollection of any of this, like no clue what happened. I knew I'd been drinking, but like the ambulance had to come, like it was a mess. And I have a layover in Salt Lake City. And I missed 3 flights while I'm there, which is just, I mean, like
you
I
got
was
stuck
so
in
drunk.
Salt Lake City. Okay.
And that is when I pick, like, that is, I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, I knew right then that was my freaking rock bottom. Because I had a 7-month-old at home. I'm sitting drunk in Salt Lake City airport. I had just, I'd started working in Orinda. I had this great job. I had this beautiful boy. I have a family that has literally tried everything. And I'm sitting in this freaking airport and my mom calls and she's like, I don't even know what to do anymore. And I just was like, Landon, like, it's either now or you are about to literally lose everything and everybody. And I prayed. Like, I just sat there, I cried and I prayed. And I called Camille and I said, Camille, like, I need to come back. I need something. And my insurance was in the process of transferring over. Y'all didn't take my insurance anymore. And she said, let me call Chris. And she does. And you let me come. And I remember being so grateful for that because I knew I was going back to a place that it felt like home to me, but it was also, I knew the people there weren't going to take my shit anymore. And I remember you telling me on the phone, you said, this is the last fucking time. And you said, if you don't get this now, Landon, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it. And so I'm like, okay. And and I'm so grateful for that. And I call my mom and I'm like, I'm going to Orange County. And she's like, what? I was like, I'm going to Orange County. And she's like, okay, I'll get your flight. Fly down there. And I'm there. I think I was there for 2 weeks and you worked your butt off finding me a good place to go that took my insurance at the time. But during those 2 weeks, it's like my heart changed. This was not I just need to get sober. Like, I'm so tired. Like, this was, people are done with you. Nobody wants you anymore. You're about to lose your son. They're going to take him away from you, which they should have, like, your health is declining. Like, you are better. Like, and I was like, I don't want to be that for my son. I don't want to be that for my husband. I don't want to be that for my family. But I was like, I know I'm better than this. And that's when I made the decision right then. I was like, I'm doing it this time. And I ended up, so I was with y'all for 2 weeks. You found me an amazing place in Palm Springs. It's hot as hell there. But I went, I finished my 12 steps with Camille. I did everything she told me. When I was going through so much like drama with my husband at the time, because, he's with the baby, he's angry with me, and when you're getting sober, like you have to realize and you have to call yourself out on how many selfish things that you do. And I realized how selfish of a person I was, and that you don't just get rid of them like that. So I was still being so selfish in this like road to recovery this last time. And, at this point, like he's like, I want out. So, but that's when I also decided, thanks to my sponsor, she was like, stop worrying about the outside. And she's like, that's your problem. Like, you need to worry just about you right now. She said, you need to take this time. You need to figure out what the hell is going on with you that you can't get this. She said, because if you don't fix yourself, there is absolutely no way that you are fixing anything else out there. And I was like, okay, you're right. And so that is when I said, okay, this entire time I'm here in Palm Springs, away from my baby. I missed his first Halloween, his first Thanksgiving. Luckily, I got to be there for Christmas. But I focused on myself. I prayed so many times a day. I was honest about everything, like everything. With my therapist, with my sponsor. Like, I was done lying. I was done trying to make myself look better than, because I was so embarrassed of like my past or things that I've done. And it, like, you will not get sober until you get to that point, until you are honest with yourself to realize that, like, yeah, you are a piece of shit when you're drunk. Like, you do make these horrible decisions. Like, you don't get to just blame your alcoholism on trauma or things that happened to you in the past. Like, you're 32 years old or 31 at the time. Like, like, you are an adult. You're making these decisions. Like, stop blaming everybody else and and just stop. And so that's what I did. And it was hard. But I remember when I coined out and I was going home and I was like, this is it. And I was terrified, but I knew the one thing I had to do was just keep working a freaking program and everything was going to be okay. I moved back up here, but I moved into a sober living so I could still see my son and my husband, but I was at a sober living. I was going to a meeting every single night. I started back to work, but I never, ever put anything before my sobriety. And to that, I still don't. Because if I do, I will lose every single thing I put before it.
So let's talk a little bit about right now and today. And here's a really cool picture of you and your husband and Bear. Tell me about just your family today, your work life today, how you balance your recovery with all that, where you're at.
So I am I'm finally the mom I'm supposed to be. The mom that my mom was to me. I'm not perfect, don't get me wrong. And like, believe me, there's times where I'm just like, dude, like, what is this? But, I'm actually able to handle things clear-minded and I'm present. And I think that is the best feeling for me is I can see my son do something funny or something that's just memorable. And I know I'm going to remember it the next day because I'm not secretly drinking somewhere, or I know if something serious happens and he gets hurt, I can actually take care of him and, not have to worry about like getting him somewhere because I've been drinking. But just to even take the drinking out of it, like just living a sober life in an working an honest program is everything in my life works out now. Everything. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some bad times, but it's crazy. Like, just every little thing that I used to blow into this big ordeal, like, it's not a big deal, and if I'm sober for some reason, my life is it's not flawless, but it's just not as disastrous as it was whenever I was drinking. And like, everybody always told me that. but I was like, I have the worst like luck anyways, like blah blah blah. But like I realize now, like if you're not drinking, things really aren't that bad if you're clear minded and can handle it, you know. So my marriage is the strongest it's ever been. It took a lot for us to get here. I put him through a lot, you know, and like he made mistakes and I made mistakes, but he didn't give up on me. And you know, we decided that if we're going to stay together, we need to make sure it's a good environment to raise Bear in. And you know, I come home and like we have a family, like we have a nice home now. You know, I'm driving a new car. I'm working full time. He's working full time. Like the grandparents only have Bear like whenever they ask to see him. They're not being forced to take care of him because I'm too drunk to handle things. You know, I just feel like my life has come together, and I'm really proud of who I am as a mother. Because Bear did not choose to have an alcoholic mom, but he deserves to have one that's in recovery. You know,
Yeah.
like he doesn't have to have one that's living this life of like just shambles, you know. And I'm so lucky that he was too young to know I was gone. But you know, we're gonna have to have those hard decisions or those hard conversations with him because he has addiction on both sides of his family,
Sure.
you know, mom and dad. And but now, you know, I can say that like I'm brave enough to tell him my story. And I realize it's important to tell him my story because I don't want to go through this with him, but you know, I don't know what the future holds, but
Sure.
at least I'm not going to be living this lifestyle like that can, you know,
Right.
give him so much trauma.
And you bring up a really good point. I just want to kind of expand on a little bit is you talk about putting your sobriety first and what you need to do in order to stay sober. And that allows us to be parents. That allows us to go to work. It allows us to be husbands and wives and things of that nature. And, you know, I think that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand. Like it's the most important thing that I'm a mom or I'm a dad or I'm a this or I'm a that. And with alcoholics and addicts, it's important that we keep our sobriety mechanics first, and then we get to do all that other stuff, and we get to do that and be present. So that's a really neat point you brought up. I'm extremely proud of you. I've known you since 2020, right?
3 years
So
now.
we're going on 3.5, 4 years, and I've watched your journey, Landon, and you can definitely see the light has come on in your eyes, and it's really neat
Thank
to
you.
get to do this. One last question before we go. I just want you to talk just a little bit about SCC and South Coast Counseling, and you know what that's done for you and what it means for you and why you think that's a special place.
Absolutely. SEC is the place that changed my life. It is a family there. It is not, I've only been at one other treatment, and I can't even compare the two because beginnings for me saw me at my worst. And they always welcomed me back. They never kicked me when I was down. They welcomed me back. And it's not that SEC is just like, come here, like, you know, they hold you accountable for your actions, which is huge. But they do it while loving you because the majority of people there have been in your shoes. And I think one thing I love about SEC the most is that you can trust people there. You know, people that work there they literally have your best interest in mind. And that's really hard to find, I think, because you hear a lot of these stories from other treatment centers that is crazy. But I never experienced that with SCC. Like they genuinely care for you. And I owe them my life. I owe SCC my life because, you know, without them, I for sure would not be here today. I know for a fact I wouldn't. And I wouldn't have the relationships I have today. I wouldn't have those people. Like, I know for a fact if I was stuck in a rut, I could pick up my phone and call you and you would, hands down, you would be there if I needed you. And that is what it's like with every single employee at SEC. And that's really hard to come by. And I've never known a place to have so many genuine, good-hearted people. And you need that when you're going through the hardest journey of your life. You need people like that, and you need that, those relationships. You're going to have those relationships for the rest of your life. Like, there are people from SEC and beginnings I will never, ever forget, and I owe them my life as well.
Yeah, it is special. So
it's very special. So,
okay, Landon, will you go enjoy your day, and good luck with 7th grade starting next week. And
yes,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, and
So,
we
all right, I love
appreciate
you,
you
Chris.
coming
Thank
on. Love you too. All right, bye-bye.
All right.